Our world is brittle. One drought, one stalled cargo ship, one failed crop, and our systems teeter on the edge of collapse. We have more technology than ever, but we are more fragile than ever. But what if this fragility isn't the human condition? What if it's a choice? For thousands of years on this same continent, people faced droughts, blizzards, and fires. Yet they built systems so resilient that widespread famine was not the threat it is today. Tour. Act the paradox of abundance. Scene 1. The myth of a brutal land. The story we are often told about pre-contact North America is one of a brutal, unforgiving wilderness, a story of a sparse population living a grim hand-to-mouth existence perpetually at the mercy of nature. The starving Indian is a powerful, persistent, and colonial myth. It's a myth that was necessary to justify a continent's theft. If the land was untamed and the people primitive, then civilization was not an invasion, but a rescue. This entire narrative is fundamentally wrong. When settlers arrived, they didn't find a wilderness. They found a garden, a 20 million square mile continent-spanning garden, managed and cultivated by millions of people. They were so blinded by their own agricultural model rows of single crops in a fenced field that they couldn't see the food that was all around them. They literally starved on land that was providing an embarrassment of riches for the indigenous inhabitants. This documentary is about a different story. It's an answer to a provocative question. Why didn't they starve? Of course, this is a generalization. Hunger is a human constant. Individuals and families faced hardship. Blizzards could be brutal. Localized failures happened. But systemic society collapsing famine, the kind that regularly plagued Europe and Asia, the kind born from a single failed crop, that was largely absent. My ancestors had a different contract with the world. The modern world operates on a principle of extraction. You take. The indigenous world, my world, operates on a principle of reciprocity. You are given, and in return, you give back. You give thanks. You give care. You give management. This isn't just a spiritual belief. It is a survival strategy. When you see the world as a relative, you don't destroy your pantry. You tend it. Scene 2. The Southwestern Proof. There is perhaps no better place to test this thesis than here. The American Southwest, home to the Hopi-Zuni-Dine Navajo and the ancestors of the Puebloan people. This is a land of extremes, blistering heat, freezing winters. And the rain is a memory, a promise, and a prayer. We have data, we have tree rings, we have sediment cores, and what they show is staggering. The people who built Chaco Canyon, the people who have lived on the Hopi mesas for 1,000 years, they endured droughts that were worse than anything we've seen in modern history. I'm talking 50, 60, 100-year droughts. And yet their populations didn't just survive. For long stretches, they thrived. They built cities. They created sophisticated art. They ran trade networks that spanned the continent. So the question for us is, how? How in a land with almost no water did they build a sustainable civilization, while we, with all our technology, are running our reservoirs dry in just 2 decades? The answer isn't a single silver bullet. It's a system, a complex, multi-layered, redundant system built on 4 foundational pillars, a diverse pantry mastery of water, long-term preservation, and a philosophy of constant motion. They didn't just have a plan B, they had a plan C, D, E, and F. Actor 2, The Resilient System, Part 1, Pillar 1. The diverse pantry. Our modern food system is a pyramid balanced on a pinhead. It's based on monoculture. A handful of crops, corn, wheat, soy, cover millions of acres. This is incredibly efficient when everything goes right. But when one pest, one fungus, or one drought targets that single crop, the entire system collapses. The indigenous food system was the complete opposite. It was based on polyculture and diversity. An average hunter-gatherer group in, say, California would have routinely eaten over 150 different species of plants and over 70 species of animals. Think about that. If one food source failed, if the acorn mast was low one year, it didn't matter. They would pivot to the pine nuts. If the deer were scarce, they focused on rabbits and salmon. Their portfolio was diversified. This wasn't just passive foraging. This was active management. They were wild tending. When a woman dug up camas bulbs of vital carbohydrate, she would replant the smaller bulbs. She was weeding, tilling, and aerating the soil, creating better conditions for next year's crop. When they harvested berries, they pruned the bushes. They understood that harvesting with the plant's life cycle, not against it, increased the yield. We were taught to see the weeds as food. Lamb's quarter amaranth dandelion. These are pioneer plants. They grow in disturbed soil. They are packed with more nutrients than the spinach you buy at the store. To a settler, it's a messy, uncontrolled patch of weeds. To my grandmother, it's a salad bar. It's medicine. It's a sign that the land is healthy and alive. Pillar 2. The acorn and the oak. To understand the depth of this system, let's look at a single food, the acorn. For many tribes in California, the acorn was the staff of life, their equivalent of wheat or corn. But there's a problem. Acorns are full of toxic tannins. You can't just eat them. They require process. First, they were gathered in monumental quantities. Entire families would move to the oak groves. They were dried for months, often in beautiful specially built granaries called charca. Then they were pounded into a fine flour. This flour was then leached. It was placed in a sandy basin by a river, and water, sometimes hot, sometimes cold, was poured over it again and again for hours, washing the bitter, toxic tannins away. The resulting paste could be cooked into a nourishing high-fat, high-protein mush or baked into bread. This is not simple gathering. This is a sophisticated, multi-step, delayed-return food production system. It requires foresight planning, chemistry, and communal labor. But the payoff is enormous. A mature oak grove can produce more carbohydrates and fat per acre than a modern wheat field. And it does so every year without tilling, without irrigation, and without fertilizer. It's a perfect food, but it's also drought-proof. Why? Because an oak tree's roots run 50-100 feet deep. They tap into water sources that shallow-rooted annual crops like corn can't dream of reaching. A corn crop will fail in a single dry season. The oaks will produce even in the driest years. The people who built their society on the oak rather than the corn built their house upon a rock. Pillar 3. The gardener's fire. But this oak grove, this garden, it wasn't an accident. It was created, and its chief tool of creation was fire. We are told to fear fire, Smokey the Bear, but fire is a tool, it's a medicine. For us, it was the primary tool of land management. My ancestors, all indigenous people, they burned constantly. This wasn't the catastrophic wildfire we see today. This was low-intensity, cultural burning, set intentionally in specific seasons. This fire did several things at once. 1. It cleared brush. It burned out the dead, dry undergrowth, preventing the ladder fuels that turn a small fire into an inferno. 2. It recycled nutrients. The ash fertilized the soil. 3. It managed pests. It killed off insects and diseases that would otherwise infest the oaks and berries. 4. It created habitat. By clearing the canopy, it allowed sunlight to hit the forest floor, promoting a mosaic of habitats. This open, grassy edge is precisely what game animals, deer, elk, rabbits, love. When tribes burned the fields, they were intentionally cultivating the plants they needed. Fire triggers the germination of specific seeds. It encourages the growth of huckleberries, soaproot, and the grasses used for basket weaving. They weren't just hunting and gathering. They were farming with fire. They were creating and managing the very abundance that sustained them. The wilderness that settlers discovered was in fact the product of thousands of years of this meticulous fiery gardening. And in a drought, this practice was even more critical. Fire thinned the forest, meaning less competition among trees for what little water there was. It kept the springs from being choked out by brush. The system they built used fire to create resilience to drought. Today, after a century of fire suppression, of actively banning indigenous burning our forests, are choked, sick, and explosive, we are paying the price for ignoring this ancient drought-proofing wisdom. Act Thread, the Resilient System, Part 2. Pillar 4 masters of water, but fire-tending works in a forest. What about here in the desert, where there are no oaks and rain, is a ghost. This is where indigenous ingenuity becomes almost miraculous. Here the entire society was engineered around one simple principle: every drop counts. We have a saying, the rain follows the corn, but it also means you must prepare the way for the rain. You must show the spirits that you are ready, that you honor them. We have been farming here, in this same spot, for over 2,000 years. We do not have rivers. We do not have wells or irrigation. We farm with the rain that falls from the sky. We call it Ak-Chin farming, or dry farming. Hopi dry farming is a masterclass in hydrology and soil science. First location, they didn't plant in the flat open fields. They planted at the Ak-Chin, the mouth of an arroyo or wash. They knew that when a rare thunderstorm hit, all the water from the surrounding watershed would be funneled to this one spot. Second design. The Zuni developed waffle gardens. They built small raised earth walls around each plant or small cluster of plants. When the rain came, this waffle would capture the water and hold it, preventing runoff and forcing it to sink deep into the soil right at the plant's roots. It also acted as a windbreak, protecting the plant from the dry, desiccating desert winds. It's incredible. We've excavated these fields. A Hopi farmer will plant a corn kernel 12 to 18 inches deep. A modern farmer plants 2 inches deep. Why so deep? Because they're not planting in the topsoil, they're planting in the stored winter moisture. The sand on top acts as a natural mulch, preventing that deep moisture from evaporating. They are planting this year's crop in last year's water. This required a special kind of corn, one bred over 1,000 years, to have a long, tough mesocotyle that could push its way up through a foot of soil to find the sun. This corn was tough, scrubby, and brilliantly adapted. They managed water not just in their fields, but across the entire landscape. They built thousands of tiny check dams, simple lines of rocks in the washes. These dams didn't stop the water. They slowed it. This simple act did 3 things. 1. It prevented the flood from becoming a destructive, erosive torrent. 2. It gave the water time to sink into the ground, recharging the aquifer. 3. The silt and organic matter would get trapped behind the dam, building new soil. They weren't just building dams, they were feeding the water. They were healing the land. Every farmer was also a water engineer. Every planting was a prayer. In a drought, these techniques were their salvation. The deep-planted corn would find the moisture. The waffle gardens would capture every precious drop. They had engineered a system that expected drought. Drought was not a crisis. It was normal. Pillar 5. The strategy of motion. In the desert, the solution was to stay put and engineer the land. But on the Great Plains, the opposite strategy held true: never stay put. For the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Comanche, resilience was mobility. The modern model is to move the resources to the people. We build cities in the desert and then spend billions of dollars to build pipelines to move water from 1,000 miles away. This is fragile. If that pipeline breaks, the city dies. The Plains model was to move the people to the resources. This is anti-fragile. The Plains are not one uniform landscape. It's a patchwork. A drought might hit the western part of the territory, but the eastern river valleys might be flush. The berries might fail on one hill, but the choke cherries might be booming in the next. The people moved. They followed a seasonal round, a predictable and ancient rotation. They would be in the river valleys in the winter, sheltered from the wind. In the spring, they'd move to the prairies for the first green shoots and to hunt the bison. In the summer, to the mountains or hills for berries. In the fall, back to the valleys for the nut harvest. Their entire society was designed to be portable. The tipi is an architectural marvel. It can be taken down in 15 minutes and put up in an hour. It's warm in winter, cool in summer. It's a home, not a prison. And at the center of this mobile universe was the bison, the buffalo. The bison was a walking supermarket, but it was also a drought-proof supermarket. Like the Oaks bison are incredibly resilient. Their herds would also move, using their deep instinctual knowledge to find water and grass, where a domestic cow would simply lie down and die. By following the bison, the people were tapping into the bison's own drought survival strategy. They were partners. A single hunt could provision a camp for months, but it had to be preserved, which brings us to the third pillar, the technology of time. Pillar 6. The art of preservation. If you can't store food, you are only ever 3 days from a crisis. The genius of indigenous cultures was not just in getting food, but in keeping it. They were masters of preservation. Drying was the most common method. Meat was cut into thin tappa or jerky and dried by the sun. Fish was smoked and dried. Berries were mashed into cakes and sun-baked. Squash was cut into rings and hung, turning it into a long-lasting vegetable noodle. Drying is simple, but it's brilliant. What causes food to rot? Water. Water allows bacteria and mold to grow. Remove the water and you stop time. You can make food shelf-stable for months, even years. In a drought, you weren't eating this week's hunt. You were eating last year's hunt, which you had dried and stored. Storage was an art form. The acorn granaries of California were rodent-proof and ventilated. In the plains, they dug cache pits, underground storage cellars lined with clay and hides. These were so effective and so well hidden that a returning party could dig up their cache of dried corn and meat a year later, perfectly preserved. But the masterpiece, the absolute pinnacle of this technology, was pemmican. Pemmican is a superfood. It's the original energy bar. It powered my people for generations. It powered the fur trade. It's perfect. The process was laborious, but the result was revolutionary. 1. Meat, the driest, leanest bison meat, was pounded into a floss-like powder. 2. Fat. The richest fat, the tashinlu or bone marrow and back fat, was rendered heated and purified. 3. Berries, dried, pulverized choke cherries, or Saskatoon berries were added for vitamins and flavor. These 3 ingredients were mixed together and packed tightly into rawhide parfleche bags. What they've created is a food that is calorically dense, nutritionally complete, and virtually indestructible. The rendered fat coats every fiber of the dried meat, sealing it off from oxygen and bacteria. It cannot spoil. Properly made pemmican can last 10, 20, even 50 years. Archaeologists have found caches of it that are still technically edible after a century. In a drought, a handful of pemmican could keep a hunter going for a full day. It was the ultimate insurance policy. Pillar 7. The social safety net. No system, no matter how clever, is 100% infallible. 1 year, the drought might be so bad that even the oaks fail. The bison may mysteriously vanish. What happens then? This is what is so fascinating. No camp was an island. We have found evidence of trade networks that are staggering in their complexity and scale. We're talking a continent-wide web of connection. Oh, Drought. If you were a Hopi farmer and your corn crop failed, you were not isolated. You were part of a trade network. You could trade your skillfully woven textiles, or your pottery, or your stored turquoise for dried bison meat from the plains tribes. Or you could trade for food from a group just 50 miles away who lived in a different watershed and whose crops had not failed. But it was more than just trade. It was kinship. It was relationship. The core social value was generosity. A man's wealth was not measured by what he kept, but by what he gave away. A giveaway ceremony, a potlatch. This was how you gained status. By sharing. By ensuring your neighbors, your relatives, your community, that everyone had enough. This social structure is itself the ultimate drought survival strategy. Hoarding was seen as a mental illness. The individual could not get rich at the expense of the community. In a good year, you gave away your surplus. In a drought year, the community's stored goodwill and stored food came back to you. Our food system was diverse. Our water system was clever. Our storage was smart. But our society was kind. That is why we survived. The system was resilient because it was based on diversity, redundancy, mobility, and above all, community. Act 4. The Great Disruption. So what happened? If this system was so resilient, so brilliantly adapted, so sustainable, where did it go? Why is the enduring image of the 19th and 20th century Native American one of poverty, hunger, and dependence? This system, perfected over 10,000 years, was resilient to any natural disaster. It was built to withstand drought blizzards and localized failures. But it was not and could not be prepared for a new force, one that did not play by nature's rules. It could not withstand a man-made, calculated, and systematic policy of total destruction. The system didn't fail. It didn't break. It was murdered. It was targeted piece by piece, and it was assassinated. It's that simple. The campaign of destruction began with the pillars of the system. On the Great Plains, the U.S. Army and the settlers quickly learned that you could not conquer a mobile, self-sufficient people. To control the Plains tribes, to force them onto reservations, you had to first destroy their food source, their home, their entire universe. You had to destroy the bison. This was a deliberate, openly stated military strategy. General Philip Sheridan in 1875 argued for it before Congress. The policy was clear. Every buffalo dead is an Indian gone. They unleashed commercial hunters, protected by the army, who killed the bison not for food, but for their hides. It was an industrial-scale slaughter. The herd, estimated at 30 to 60 million, was reduced to less than 1,000 animals in just over a decade. It is the most rapid and complete destruction of a species in human history. They didn't just kill the bison. They killed the diverse pantry. They killed the strategy of motion. They killed the tippy the sinew for thread, the bones for tools, the fuel for the fire, and the pemmican that made them impervious to a drought. The central pillar was gone. On the west coast, the same story with a different target. The salmon, the bison of the northwest, was the center of their economy. But industrial canneries soon claimed the river's overharvesting on a scale never before seen. Tribes were forcibly barred from their ancestral fishing spots. At the same time, the rivers themselves were being killed. Mining operations poisoned the water with arsenic and mercury. Logging operations choked the streams with silt, destroying the spawning grounds. And then the dams. One after another, great walls of concrete that permanently blocked the ancient migration, starving the people upstream. In California, the tool of creation was relabeled as a tool of destruction. The new state government passed laws in the 1850s that banned cultural burning. What had been a tool of gardening, a way to promote oaks and berries, was now arson. The gardener's fire was extinguished. The forests, untended for the first time in millennia, began to choke. Finally, the land itself was taken. Tribes were rounded up and forced onto reservations, often on the worst land parcels that were deliberately chosen because they were unproductive. The Hopi masters of Ak-Chin farming were given land without the washers, and then they were forced to grow crops like wheat that were completely unsuited to the desert. It was a system designed to fail. In a single generation, every pillar of their resilience was shattered. Their diverse pantry was replaced with a monoculture of failure. Their mobility was replaced with forced confinement. Their water wisdom was blocked by dams. Their fire tending was criminalized. And their social safety net, the economy of generosity, was replaced by a system of government dependence designed to break their communal spirit. This is when starvation became a reality, not from drought, but from policy. The food deserts you hear about in modern America. The reservations were the first food deserts, and they gave us food that was not our food: white flour, sugar, processed lard. And with this food came new diseases: diabetes, heart disease, the very illnesses that plague our communities to this day. This wasn't just a loss of land. It was a biological and cultural catastrophe, a severing of the most sacred relationships. Act 5. The Return of Wisdom. But the story does not end in tragedy. A system can be broken, a people can be oppressed, but knowledge, once born of the land, is as resilient as the land itself. It was not lost. It was protected. It was held safe in stories, in songs, in the actions of elders who refused to forget. It was passed down in whispers, waiting for a generation brave enough to reclaim it. Today, across the continent, that knowledge is not just sleeping. It is waking up. In a powerful indigenous-led movement called food sovereignty, tribes are actively rejecting the system of government dependency and the commodity foods that poisoned their health. They are quite literally reclaiming their food. They are planting the ancestral gardens. They are saving the heirloom seeds that were nearly lost. When they gave us the white flour and the lard, they tried to make us forget the taste of our own food. They tried to make us forget who we were. For us, food sovereignty is the right to define our own relationship with the land. When I plant my grandmother's blue corn, the same corn my ancestors planted in this very spot, I am not just planting food, I am planting my identity. I am decolonizing my diet. I am healing the intergenerational trauma that came from that government ration box. And what's fascinating is that the modern world is just catching up. We are studying these heirloom crops, the tepary bean, the Sonoran squash, the Hopi corn, and what we're finding is astonishing. They are not only more nutrient-dense than most commercial crops, they are unbelievably resilient. They are climate-smart superfoods that can grow in high heat with minimal water. Modern agribusiness is spending billions trying to genetically engineer this kind of drought resistance. The genius was already here. It was just being ignored. And it's not just the plants. The great animal at the heart of the plains culture is also returning. The Intertribal Buffalo Council, a coalition of over 80 tribes, is leading the effort to restore the tatanka, the bison, to tribal lands. The bison is not just meat. It is our relative. It's an ecological keystone. When they return, the land heals. Their hooves are designed to break up the soil, allowing seeds to plant. Their grazing patterns promote the diversity of the native grasses. Their wallows create micro-wetlands for frogs and birds. When the bison come back, the entire prairie comes back to life. But more than that, they heal our people. To see them run free, to once again share the meat with the community, to restore that economy of generosity. It brings back our health. It brings back our ceremonies. It brings back our spirit. You cannot separate the people from the buffalo. And perhaps the most dramatic reversal, the world is finally desperately turning to the wisdom it once criminalized, after a century of a disastrous fire suppression policy, a policy that banned cultural burning and allowed our forests to become choked sick and explosive. State and federal agencies are turning to indigenous elders for answers. For decades, fire ecologists would hold summits, and tribal members from the Karuk-Yurok and other groups would stand up and say, "The forest is sick. It is overcrowded. It needs its medicine. It needs the good fire." And they were ignored. They were dismissed as unscientific. Now, after trillions of dollars and millions of acres have been lost to catastrophic megafires, those same elders are the ones leading the classes. They are teaching the U.S. Forest Service how to reintroduce fire, not as an enemy, but as a partner. We began by asking why Native American camps never starved in a drought. The answer is they had a system that valued diversity over monoculture, redundancy over efficiency, mobility over stagnation, and community over the individual. Their resilience was not just in their tools, it was in their worldview, a worldview of respect and reciprocity. These revival movements are not just nostalgia. They are the deliberate reactivation of this resilient system. They are the answer to our most modern problems: climate change, biodiversity, collapse, and a fragile, disconnected society. It's not about going back. You can't go back. It's about bringing the knowledge forward. This wisdom is not just Native American history. It's a survival guide for humanity. Our modern world is fragile because it has forgotten how to be a good relative to the land, to the water, and to each other. This knowledge is our shared inheritance. And as the world gets drier and hotter and more uncertain, we are going to need every last bit of it. The knowledge you saw in this film was suppressed for generations, but it was never lost. Today, food sovereignty movements, cultural fire programs, and indigenous-led conservation efforts are healing the land and securing a future for the next generation. But this work is not easy. It's a fight against a century of policy and a lack of resources. The greatest way to honor this wisdom is to support it. We've placed links in the description below to organizations like the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance, the Intertribal Buffalo Council, and cultural fire management groups. If this story changed the way you see the world, please like this video and share it. It helps the algorithm show this wisdom to more people. And to join us on more journeys like this, please subscribe and hit the bell. Thank you for watching.